Welcome back to the Course on the Diamond Sutra. I'm Parang Geri Larkin, and this is lecture 8 of 9 lectures. And for this lecture, I'll finish reading the sutra and hope that you are as thrilled with the ending as I am. And then I'll use the last lecture just to review some of the main components of the sutra and to share 1 or 2 examples of how manifesting it might happen in this place and time that we share together right now. All right, so we left off with chapter 24, and Buddha was asking Subhuti if a man or woman brought together as many piles of the 7 jewels as all the Mount Sumerus. And you'll see that there's this feeling of a last great push at the end of the sutra, because he circles back around to that question in slightly different forms, something like 3 times in these last chapters, so you can listen for them while I read. 25. Subhuti, what do you think? Does it occur to the Tathagata, I rescue beings? Surely, Subhuti, you should hold no such view. And why not? Subhuti, the being does not exist who is rescued by the Tathagata. Subhuti, if any being were rescued by the Tathagata would be attached to a self. He would be attached to a being, attached to a life, and attached to a soul. Attachment to a self, Subhuti, is said by the Tathagata to be no attachment. Yet foolish people remain attached, and foolish people, Subhuti, are said by the Tathagata to be no people. Thus they are called foolish people. 26. Subhuti, what do you think? Can the Tathagata be seen by means of the possession of attributes? Subhuti replied, No, indeed, Bhagavan. As I understand the meaning of what the Buddha says, the Tathagata cannot be seen by means of the possession of attributes. The Buddha said, Well done, Subhuti, well done. So it is, Subhuti. It is as you claim. The Tathagata cannot be seen by means of the possession of attributes. And why not? Subhuti, if the Tathagata could be seen by the means of the possession of attributes, a universal king would be a Tathagata. Hence, the Tathagata cannot be seen by means of the possession of attributes. The Venerable Subhuti said to the Buddha, As I understand the meaning of what the Buddha says, the Tathagata cannot be seen by means of the possession of attributes. On that occasion, the Buddha then spoke this gatha. Who looks for me in form, who seeks me in a voice, indulges in wasted effort, such people see me not. 27. Subhuti, what do you think? Was it due to the possession of attributes that the Tathagata realized unexcelled perfect enlightenment? Subhuti, you should hold no such view. And why not? Subhuti, it could not have been due to the possession of attributes that the Tathagata realized unexcelled perfect enlightenment. Furthermore, Subhuti, someone may claim those who set forth on the Bodhisattva path announce the destruction or the end of some dharma. Subhuti, you should hold no such view. And why not? Those who set forth on the Bodhisattva path do not announce the destruction or the end of any dharma. 28. Furthermore, Subhuti, if a noble son or daughter took as many worlds as there are grains of sand in the Ganges and covered them with the 7 jewels and gave them as a gift to the Tathagatas, the Arhans, the fully enlightened ones, and a Bodhisattva gained an acceptance of the selfless, birthless nature of dharmas, the body of merit produced as a result would be immeasurably, infinitely greater. And yet, Subhuti, this fearless Bodhisattva would not obtain a body of merit. The Venerable Subhuti said, But surely, Bhagavan, this Bodhisattva would obtain a body of merit. The Buddha replied, They would, Subhuti, but without grasping it. Thus is it called obtaining. 29. Furthermore, Subhuti, if anyone should claim that the Tathagata goes or comes, or stands or sits or lies on a bed, Subhuti, they do not understand the meaning of my words. And why not? Subhuti, those who are called Tathagatas do not go anywhere, nor do they come from anywhere. Thus they are called Tathagatas, Arhats, fully enlightened ones. 30. Furthermore, Subhuti, if a noble son or daughter took as many worlds as there are specks of dust in a billion-world universe, and by an expenditure of limitless energy ground them into a multitude of atoms, Subhuti, what do you think? Would there be a great multitude of atoms? Subhuti replied, so there would, Bhagavan, so there would, Sugata, so there would be a great multitude of atoms. And why? If a great multitude of atoms existed, Bhagavan, the Tathagata would not have spoken of a multitude of atoms. And why? Bhagavan, this multitude of atoms of which the Tathagata speaks is said by the Tathagata to be no multitude. Thus it is called a multitude of atoms. Also, Bhagavan, this billion-world universe of which the Tathagata speaks is said by the Tathagata to be no universe. Thus it is called a billion-world universe. And how so? Bhagavan, if a universe existed, attachment to an entity would exist. But whenever the Tathagata speaks of attachment to an entity, the Tathagata speaks of it as no attachment. Thus it is called attachment to an entity. The Buddha said, Subhuti, attachment to an entity is inexplainable and inexpressible, for it is neither a dharma nor no dharma. Foolish people, though, are attached. 31. And how so? Subhuti, if someone should claim that the Tathagata speaks of a view of a self, or that the Tathagata speaks of a view of a being, a view of a life, a view of a soul, Subhuti, would such a claim be true? Subhuti said, no indeed, Bhagavan, no indeed, Sugata. Such a claim would not be true. And why not? Bhagavan, when the Tathagata speaks of a view of a self, the Tathagata speaks of it as no view. Thus it is called a view of self. The Buddha said, indeed, Subhuti, so it is. Those who set forth on the Bodhisattva path know, see, and believe all dharmas, but know, see, and believe them without being attached to the perception of a dharma. And why not? The perception of a dharma, Subhuti. The perception of a dharma is said by the Tathagata to be no perception. Thus it is called the perception of a dharma. 32. Furthermore, Subhuti, if a fearless bodhisattva filled measureless, infinite worlds with the 7 jewels and gave them as an offering to the Tathagatas, the Arhats, the fully enlightened ones, and a noble son or daughter grasped but a single 4-line gata of this teaching on the perfection of wisdom, and memorized, discussed, recited, mastered, and explained it in detail to others, the body of merit produced by that noble son or daughter as a result would be immeasurably, infinitely greater. And how should they explain it? By not explaining. Thus it is called explaining. As a lamp, a cataract, a star in space, an illusion, a dewdrop, a bubble, a dream, a cloud, a flash of lightning, view all created things like this. All this was spoken by the Buddha to the joy of the elder Subhuti, the monks and nuns, the laymen and laywomen, the bodhisattvas, the devas, humans, asuras, and gandharvas of the world, all of whom were greatly pleased with what the Buddha said. The end. So here it is, this fabulous, 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 fabulous teaching, which of course kicks my butt at the very end when it says, well, if you explain it with words, it's not explanation. So we have to think about, what does that mean? What does that mean? All right, so I came up with some comments, just a few things to say about each of these chapters. And then I'll leave you with 2 themes to think about and a question before next week. So here we are finishing up this dance of the dialectic, and I'm guessing that none of you will miss this. Is it an attribute? No attribute. Therefore, it's called an attribute dance. But it's so important because it's just Buddha. You know, you have to just love this character because he keeps pulling out all these things out from under Subhuti and everybody who's listening or trying to learn this teaching. It's like he's determined by the end of the sutra. It's, you know, like he's made a vow. By the end of the 32nd chapter, these people will not be caught in all these concepts. They'll get in front of them. They'll be way more intimate and experienced. Life will be more intimate and experienced. And you have to give him his due. He really, this is just a great effort. And you can feel it when you read it, especially when you read it out loud, what a great effort it is to do this teaching. And all of this kind of over and over and over, saying these words over and over and over again. I always end up dreaming the Diamond Sutra by the end of it. Just this, what do you think, Subhuti? All right, so let's see. So in chapter 25, Buddha is still dancing with the what do you think and dance, and reiterating these teachings around being, self, life, and soul. So he's specifically going after our understanding or our belief, if you will, of what a being is, what a self is, what a life means, what a soul is. And he kind of goes at it in a deeper and deeper way. If you really just read through this specific question as you go through the sutra, you know, he gets down to, do I rescue beings? And that's a hard question to think about. I think for beginners, this would be really a tough question to even hear, because we throw ourselves, you know, at the foot of the Buddha. We chant to Amitabha Buddha or whatever, you know, Kwanseyo Posal or whoever it is that you chant to in your practice. And at least for me, when I started out, it was to be rescued, you know, from my own shit. And here he's saying, oh, wait a minute. Not only is there no rescue, but there isn't a self, a being, a life, or a soul to be rescued. And that's huge. So what he's doing is he's kind of really calling us on our vow. You know, are we willing to stick with this bodhisattva vow? And it goes back to the very beginning where he talks about fearless bodhisattvas. That word fearless really matters in this sutra. It takes great fearlessness to stay with him through these teachings in the sutra. So let's see. One of the things I said to myself here, I wrote down, so the Buddha is circling around to the bodhisattva vow here and saying that even after enlightenment, we're not ever off the hook of the vow that we've made. That when we make the bodhisattva vow, it's a forever, even though forever is not forever vow. So the trick here, how do we do that? I mean, the real trick here, he gives us the answer. When we're saying, well, how do you do that? He tells us that we need to be free of attachments. And this is really tough for you and me. I mean, we live in a world, a relative world, which he talks about later on in one of the very final chapters. But, you know, attachments, when you really look at attachments, when I look at my attachments, it's all about self. It's all about something that's making me uncomfortable or me wanting to fix. It's interesting how when I take away the attachment, I can deal in a much more skillful way with a situation. What I've learned is that the best way to do that for me is to respond very quickly, immediately to a situation that's uncomfortable before I even have a chance to think about it or wrap too much of my own melodrama around it. So really looking at attachment and how do we move through attachment with wisdom, right? So the Heart Sutra, which I read a little bit of in the last lecture, and I'm assuming that most of you chant every day, is something that reminds us that wisdom is always there. And it also reminds us of what wisdom feels like, what it feels like and tastes like. All right. So even though everyone has Buddha nature, nobody gets left out. We need a lot of help in realizing this. And what's interesting, again, is when you think about this, one of the hardest things is an admission to ourselves that when we're taking the bodhisattva vow, it includes everyone. That's a tough vow to make. And then at the same time, when we pay attention, especially in chapter 25, there are a couple of chapters where this really just strikes me as being very clear and a very strong teaching, is that even though we're making this vow, we really can't help anyone else here. I mean, I cannot take away my kids' melodrama, the melodrama of their lives. I cannot make my children calm when they're not calm. You know, I can't take away from their hunger by eating food. That's what this teaching is all about. It's just really about kind of letting go of this whole self dance that makes things not work well in the world as it is. Alrighty. So an easy test for this, the test I use for whether or not I'm kind of able to stay in this place that Buddha's talking about in chapter 25, is to watch my own thinking. And as long as there's a subject or object in the thinking, I know I have to be really careful there, because that's where attachment's starting to get into the situation. I mean, we can't survive in the world today without subjects and objects. The issue is really the energy and the attachment we connect to all of that. So in chapter 26, back for I think the fourth time, we have Buddha talking about possession of attributes. You know, can you find Buddha with the possession of attributes? No. He has that wonderful, wonderful gatha right in the middle of this sutra. There's this pause. Who looks for me in form, who seeks me in a voice, indulges in wasted effort, such people see me not. So he's talking here about the real Dharma body, the body of reality, and not getting caught. And we all do get caught. We get caught in form. So not getting caught in that. You know, it's, I remember when I was in the seminary, one of the things that was interesting to me was my root teacher, Samosudam, used to tell this story about how his teacher would say, well, go out and find a Buddha. Don't come back. You know, I want you to get out of the monastery and go find a Buddha. When you find a Buddha, come back and tell me about this Buddha that you found, and how he would go out and he didn't find, and he just saw regular people. And it took him a while to realize that every single person he saw was a Buddha. And that's what this is really all about. Not only everybody, but everybody, everywhere, everything. It's all Buddha. So what does that mean when you and I walk past a filthy, homeless person who's asking us for change? And when they smile at us, we can see they have no teeth from all the drug use. What happens in that moment? And what we'll find is sometimes it means we give them food. Sometimes it means we say, I'm so sorry. Sometimes it means we give that person money. But we can't even do that without this experience of Buddha to Buddha. That's what's going on here. The other side of that is, since I have a tendency to give everybody I see food or money, is to realize when we can't do this for everybody all the time, and to really kind of even out the playing field for Buddha to Buddha interactions here. So the Tathagata's Dharma body isn't in the realm of cognition. If this sutra doesn't hammer anything else home, it definitely hammers that home. Cognition helps you and I drive our cars, fill in the homework questions for this course. But when it comes to our practice, cognition can really, really get in the way if we make it more important than it is. Then in chapter 27, there's a slightly different angle of questioning here. Was it due to the possession of attributes that the Tathagata realized unexcelled perfect enlightenment? Nope. Nope. Being on a bodhisattva path does not mean that something has to be destroyed for us to be on the bodhisattva path. This is very important. The bodhisattva path, our vow to be bodhisattvas, is a vow that we make here, now, in whatever situation we're in, with whatever attributes we have. So not only does nobody get left out, but nobody, I can only say this with a double negative, nobody can't be a bodhisattva. We just absolutely can't make this connection between attributes and the realization of enlightenment. Now that's an easy thing to say and actually a really hard thing to do. And I'm guessing that you've had this. Maybe you are this person, but again, back when I was living at the Ann Arbor Temple, there was this story. This is a third-hand version of it, so hopefully parts of it are true anyway. This story that Haju used to tell about when Haju, who is now the guiding teacher, has been the guiding teacher at the Ann Arbor Temple for a long time now. She would tell this story about how when they all first started practicing, when the temple was first started, there was this fellow, this good-looking, very handsome man, who would practice every day, and no matter what, they almost had this game with this fellow. No matter what, he was always the first one in the Dharma hall. He always practiced longer than everybody else. You go down the middle of the night, and there he was practicing. And it was actually pretty hard for the other students to not be really jealous of this fellow. And then finally one time, somebody said to him, wow, what is this? You must be completely enlightened by now, given how hard you're practicing and you're practicing all the time. And his response was to look at that person and say, oh, no, all I do is think about sex. So we never know what's going on. Oh my gosh, just think of all of the things that they had hung on this, put around this fellow, all of these attributes they had laid over him that actually were not only not true, but almost the opposite of what he was experiencing. All right, so chapter 28, I think this is the last time he talks about sons and daughters covering a gazillion worlds with jewels. And what does he say here? He says here that they can do this, but a bodhisattva who gains acceptance of the selfless, birthless nature of dharmas has more merit. So when we really, really deep in our guts can accept the selfless, birthless nature of dharmas, there is more merit in that acceptance than a son or daughter covering a gazillion worlds with jewels. You think he's made his point by now? So this is finally chapter, so at the very end here of this sutra, we finally can feel Buddha moving past this, yes, mountain, no mountain dialectic. And let me just say to each of you, if you've hung in there with this course for this long, I'm sure you've probably experienced what he's teaching here, that we, have this idea of a mountain or of whatever it is, a cup of tea. And when we actually understand, and this is why the diamond in the Diamon Sutra is so important, an image that this teacup is everything, then we can go back and sip the tea out of the teacup. It becomes a teacup again. And that's really, it's not any more than that. I think we get caught in this dialectic thinking it's something very fancy and that we really have to stretch for it when it's not. It's just an acceptance of things as they are. And then it just comes. Alrighty. So we have here, closing in on the end of the sutra in chapter 28, what I call the great cosmic joke of the sutra, which is that we are all the Dharma body. We've never been without the Dharma body. We have this Buddha nature. Oh my gosh, what to do with it? So here we are. We can accept this and start to feel it. And what do we do with it? And as this starts to happen, as this starts to come up from our belly or up our spines or however you experience this, kind of this understanding beyond understanding. In chapter 29, Buddha says, be careful, be careful, be careful. This doesn't mean that you have a specific way to sit or a specific way to stand or a specific way to be. Instead, what we're asked to do, if we want to follow the Buddha's footsteps, is we need to find what this uncreated, indestructible body is within what this body-mind is in this place and time. It's the great koan of our lives. And what it does for me, and why I first fell in love with this sutra, is that when I actually started to understand what the teaching was, I realized that what it was in the end was a teaching of complete freedom. Because when we give ourselves permission to simply be this selfless, beginningless energy, if you will, that's caught in this particular body-mind with these particular attributes which don't matter, it gives us so much freedom to really feel and understand and give permission to what it is that we are meant to be in this place and time. It is hugely, hugely freeing. Absolutely hugely freeing. It doesn't mean that there aren't obstructions. It doesn't mean that we don't need to keep shoveling the karma of the conditional knots that we have in our systems. But what it does mean is that you and I are not only given permission, but are being requested to really understand what is the deepest person, if you will, who is on the planet in this place and time, who has taken this bodhisattva vow. What's our job? And what's terrific about this is when we think of it in that way, or when we be with it in that way, it just pops. I mean, it really, really just pops. It's like, oh, I should do this. Oh my gosh, I never thought of this. This is what to be doing right now. All right. So I go over that ad nauseum to myself, convincing myself that it's okay to say this to all of you. Yeah. And then in chapter 30 and chapter 31, Buddha's he's doing a couple things. One is he's checking Subhuti's own understanding, and he goes after the self-being, soul thing again, because he just doesn't want us to get caught. He is really, really wanting us to let go of all the views that we have and to really trust that we'll be able to be in situations and to do what the situation is calling us to do. And how do we do this? We do it with compassion and morality and wisdom, which are the three components that you could underline if you were the kind of person who underlined all the way through this sutra, because it's everywhere in this sutra. So we're coming full circle, and Buddha says selflessness and birthlessness. And what I wrote down here is I said, stand on what we know, which is selflessness and birthlessness of all dharmas, and walk on what we see in the dharma body of reality. So with no controlling here, no specific point of view. And control our thoughts by accepting the perfection of wisdom and trusting the perfection of wisdom. So we get to be fearless, fearless, fearless bodhisattvas. And even then, when we're fearless bodhisattvas, we could fill infinite worlds with 7 jewels and offer them to everybody we can. But if somebody memorizes this teaching, their merit is greater. Not just greater, but immeasurably, infinitely greater. So we need to learn how to explain the Diamond Sutra by not explaining the Diamond Sutra. How do we do that? How do we do that? That's the great question of our lives. How do we do that? And then at the end is that wonderful, wonderful, wonderful little finish about bubbles and a flash of lightning. And what that does for many of us when we read the sutra is it reminds us that there isn't a lot of time here. So on the one hand, here's this great teaching. It's, beginningless, selfless. It's got morality and compassion and wisdom intertwined in every single line of the sutra. And at the same time, should we be lax in really wanting and trying to incorporate this teaching into our own body minds as they are right now? Oh, by the way, life is a bubble, a flash of lightning. So don't take too long trying to do anything other than manifest this teaching as best you can. And you'll do a great job, I know. All right. So let me finish with just a couple of comments about 2 things here. And one is this. You know, no ego, the truth of no ego is something that perhaps one of you will do a whole course on at some point. But it's important to really look at what that means. Because for me, and when I think of students I've interacted with over the last, oh my gosh, something like 20 years, when we get into trouble, it's ego. It's ego. And ego for me is sort of a summary word that's attachment to, you know, not just self, but where we think we are in the world, what we think our place in the world is, you know, how because of our attributes we should be interacted with. And it can create incredible problems. So what does having no ego mean? I mean, what does it mean? It means so many things. It means remembering the teachings of this sutra and the Heart Sutra and the different perfection of wisdom teachings, that there is no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. There's no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind. No realms, right? No realms. Because everything is the same realm. It's the beginningless, selfless realm. So how do we function in the world with no ego? That's the whole question of the Bodhisattva vow. And that's why the fearlessness is so important. It takes great courage to let go of ego, especially for those of us who have been very successful, kind of as defined by today. And when we finally can let this no eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, mind teaching penetrate, then we realize that everything that happens to you and me at the bottom is completely impersonal. And so it gives us an opportunity to practice this morality and compassion and wisdom that the sutra has been teaching us. But we can't get there until we have a taste of, oh, it's impersonal. It's impersonal. How do we get there? That's where the sutras hold us up. They really, really do hold us up. Is it easy to do? No. And in fact, it sucks more often than not. Because not only have we been trained to hold on to this self-being soul, we're rewarded for it. In almost every aspect of our lives, we're rewarded. And yet what we're being asked to do is to let go of all of it and to live our lives the way our lives are meant to be lived, no matter what anybody else says to us and no matter what anybody else wants us to do. So that means that we have to have this fearlessness to just say no to, you know, our parents, our partners if we have partners, our children if our children are older, our teachers. I mean, all of the people who have opinions about how we should be living our lives. It's about the Bodhisattva vow. And the Bodhisattva vow is what this sutra is teaching us to be driven by. And it's telling us it'll take fearlessness. It's giving us this morality and this compassion and this wisdom to rely on when we're kind of out there in space, the way it talks about at the end of the sutra. But in the end, it's there, and it's always going to be there. And so the ending of this sutra becomes really a wonderful ending for me, of course. I mean, so you can see what now, by now, you can see why I wanted to tattoo it all over me. Oh, if I wasn't afraid of pain. Because at the end, what happens? Subhuti feels joy. Is that great or what? I mean, so here's all this stuff. Here's Buddha slicing away at everything. You just seem like with a samurai sword, it's not attributes, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. You know, and he comes at it, he says, it's birthlessness, it's selflessness, Buddhas are everywhere. I mean, he is slicing, when you think about it, through just about anything you and I have ever believed or thought in our lives. He has just sliced through all of it by the end of this sutra. So while here we are all bleeding by the side of the road, what is the feeling? Joy. It's joy. Subhuti feels joy. So this great factor of enlightenment is right there at the end. Of all the feelings, this wonderful bodhisattva could feel its joy. And even the images, you know, the bubble, a flash of lightning, that's all joy. You know, when you think of a bubble, there's a daycare center up the street from this little hermitage. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw all the kids from the daycare center in the park with the soap bubbles, you know, where you blow the soap through a little wand. And they were pure joy. I mean, they were laughing and falling on their backs and bumping into each other. And it was just this great, huge experience of little kids filled with joy. And even their teachers, who normally look pretty exhausted, were kind of laughing and getting a kick out of it as well. That's the kind of joy Subhuti is feeling, this selfless, fabulous joy. A flash of lightning. Again, when you and I have the opportunity to just watch a flash of lightning, you can feel your own feeling. It's like this great natural firework experience. And there's a flash of joy there. So what does that mean? After 32 chapters in this teaching, what does that mean that it ends with joy, with Subhuti feeling joy? What it means for me is this, that this path, contrary to popular belief, is not a heavy path. I think we want to make it a heavy path. It's not a heavy path. It's a path of awakeness and appreciation for everything. Heartbreaks, yes, but if we practice for a while, we learn how to be with these things. It's important, though, and it's always important, or the sutra wouldn't end with this, to remember and allow ourselves to experience the flashes of joy that come with this practice every moment. So a flash, a bubble, a star in space, all these wonderful reminders that happen all around us, that joy is a part of this path, that it's a critical, critical part of this path. Okay, so with that, let me leave you with a question. This will be your last question for this course. In the 9th lecture, I'll leave you with something that I hope you'll do, but I won't look over your shoulder anymore after this particular question. So the homework question for lecture 8 is this. At the end of the Diamond Sutra, so now we've read the entire sutra, all 32 chapters. At the end of the Diamond Sutra, how has your understanding of its teachings changed? So let me say it again. At the end of this sutra, how has your understanding of its teachings changed? And with that, goodbye until next time. Thank you.